As an organizational psychologist, I have always been fascinated about employee well-being at work and how our emotions and motivations all feed into that phenomenon. I'm Allison Gabriel from the University of Arizona, and I'm here today to talk to you at the Future of Work conference about fatigue and emotions, some of which you've likely been feeling over the last couple of years. One of the ones I want to talk to you about the most, though, is Zoom fatigue. Now, the irony is not lost on me that I'm at a virtual conference talking to a camera about a phenomenon that is so specific to virtual meetings. But my goals today are to tell you what I know, tell you the findings, and hopefully tell you some strategies that you can take with you into work tomorrow. Now, to begin, I want to go back in time a little bit to figure out how did we even get here? To do that, we need to go back to March of 2020, specifically the week of March 9th, because that's when all of this really unfolded. It was March 11th when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. March 12th, here in the US at least, was when we started to see organizations and schools and huge events starting to shutter their doors. And March 13th is when I would say we really started to pay attention to Zoom. The CEO on that day actually started to give schools access to the platform for free because we were all flipping to virtual learning. Now, with most things, it started out kind of fun, right? In a time of social distance, these virtual platforms and virtual mediums gave us a way to connect with others. There were Zoom happy hours and parties. Families who were distanced were able to stay together. I myself attended my fair share of parties and even baby showers on the virtual platform. And when you look at writings now on the return to work, there's still discussion about how to use virtual means in a positive way to continue to have these social gatherings. However, really quickly, by April, we started to see discussions of the phenomenon Zoom fatigue, of people saying, you know what, after being on camera on these virtual meetings all day long, I am exhausted in ways that I wasn't on in-person meetings. And that's pretty tricky, right? We've had meetings before. Meetings are not new to working virtually or working remotely, but there was something going on about being in the virtual medium. And there were all sorts of articles starting to pop up to say, why is this happening? What is it and how can we possibly cure it? Now, where was I when all of this was starting to go down? I was actually nowhere to be found. I tell you this to say that I never in a million years thought I would be researching COVID-19 and something like Zoom fatigue and emotions during remote work in a pandemic. That same week of March, I was actually in the hospital having a baby. She was born on March 10th, and we had no idea the chaos that was swirling outside around us. It wasn't until we got discharged from the hospital and the pediatrician on staff said, you might want to listen to the news on the way home, and you might want to buy some toilet paper, that we actually knew something was truly wrong. When I started to return back to work in June of 2020, I made a sweeping proclamation that I will not, under any circumstance, be studying COVID-19 because it had really shaped and impacted so much of my motherhood experience. I didn't want it coming into my work. By August 2020, I was eating my words, though. I found myself on 3 COVID-19 related projects because when you study emotions and motivation and well-being, it was kind of hard to ignore that those things were on fire because of the pandemic. And there was one project in particular that started to really stand out to me, led by the brilliant Kristen Shockley from the University of Georgia and her counterpart, Darren Robertson, who works at Broadpath right here in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm so thrilled to tell you about this research today. Also in August of 2020, I started wondering what it would have been like to have a baby not in a pandemic. So if you have stories about that, I would certainly love to hear them. But on to the Zoom fatigue research. We were really puzzled by what was making these virtual meetings so tricky and so complicated and so fatiguing for people in ways that we had not seen reported before. And we had a really unique opportunity with Broadpath to actually study this with a sample of their employees. And we never imagined the takeoff that this research was going to have. We had a suspicion that it was actually the camera that was contributing to Zoom fatigue, but we wanted to go ahead and study it as carefully as possible. So, what is contributing to Zoom fatigue? There were a lot of ideas out there, but again, the thing that we thought was most suspect was being on camera. Seeing that light like I see right now, white shining at me, was maybe contributing to something unique. So, thanks to our collaboration with Broadpath, we had a really unique opportunity to work with a sample of their employees, where we actually manipulated camera use. We worked with 103 of their employees and over 1 month divided them into two groups. Group A was encouraged for the first 2 weeks of their study to use their camera in virtual meetings, whereas Group B, those employees were told to keep their cameras off. At the midpoint, we then flipped. So Group B started to use their camera and Group A turned it off for as many of their meetings as possible. We also wanted to see how they were feeling each day. So, in addition to manipulating the camera, we also gave them daily diary surveys. We were able to obtain 1,400 days of data where we were asking them their daily feelings of fatigue and some key outcomes that we thought could be linked to Zoom fatigue in particular. And we also wanted to understand if there were certain people who may be more or less reactive to this Zoom fatigue phenomenon. The big takeaways were crystal clear. I've never seen data pop like this before in all of the research that I've conducted. Being on camera in our study was positively related to feelings of fatigue. That effect was pretty whopping. And we think that this is likely due to self presentation costs. Right now, I'm talking to you and I can actually see myself talking on screen. So not only am I aware that you're watching me, but I can also see myself right now. That can be kind of distracting. And hopefully, you know the feeling I'm talking about. The other thing that's really challenging is that there's a lot of difficulties with nonverbal cues in virtual meetings that can also be contributing to these feelings of fatigue. So, unlike in person meetings where maybe people are redirecting their attention and looking at other people, or you're better able to pick up on these nonverbal cues, all of those costs are going to build up, making camera use way more fatiguing. Now, I was a little skeptical at first, and I had to wonder, and my colleagues and I had to wonder, is it really the camera? Or what about the number of meetings? What about the hours spent on virtual meetings? We actually had that data from employees' Outlook calendars, and those two variables had no effect on fatigue in our study. So, what happened then? Well, on days when employees reported feeling fatigued from being on camera, they reported lower levels of engagement and lower levels of voice, meaning they were less likely to speak up and share their ideas. There's a lot of irony in that statement. The very reason we encourage people to use cameras is because we think it's going to promote engagement. We think it's going to increase the likelihood that they're willing to speak up. But the fatigue that they feel from being on camera could actually be hindering those two things. To make things a little bit more complex, our results also showed that women and newcomers to the organization felt greater fatigue from being on camera. For women, there's likely added social pressures that they're experiencing. If you look at the data related to COVID-19, and Kristen has done incredible work on this, you'll see that women are more likely to be taking on caregiving demands, meaning they're more likely to be interrupted by a toddler or a child popping into the room. Something I've been thinking about right now as I'm talking to you all, with my toddler being here at home. But there's also gender norms and stereotypes that are also working against women that the camera can go ahead and amplify. For newcomers, it's the same thing. There are these added social costs for newcomers that they're really working against. If you've joined your organization during the pandemic, it's probably felt like a lot. You've had to pick up on norms, who everybody is, the politics, the jargon, the acronyms. And all of that is going to be even more challenging, and you're going to feel even more watched being on camera. Now, it's not just fatigue, though, that I really think we need to start talking about. My colleagues at the University of Arizona and I have been studying a wide variety of emotions, and there's a lot going on for people. There's fear and anxiety, so feeling fearful that you may catch COVID-19 and bring it home to your family, anxious about being able to secure employment or keep your job with layoffs and other budget cuts going on. There's also feelings of resentment, right? Of not being ready to return back to work and maybe feeling forced to when you wish you didn't have to. And of course, there's feelings of loneliness. And the problem with a lot of these emotions is that they spiral. So loneliness begets more loneliness. Anxiety can beget more anxiety. And so we need to talk about these emotions and figure out what it is that we can do about them. But it's not all bad. And this is where I want to start to leave you. It's that positive and negative emotions, because I truly believe there's no such thing as a bad emotion. Emotions are feedback, and we need to listen to them. Positive and negative emotions can coexist. In our research, we see that people are reporting hope and gratitude. So, hope that better times are ahead, and gratitude for the positive relationships and the jobs that they may have. We've also seen indicators of resilience, of people finding ways to bounce back from adversity. And what's really fascinating to me as an emotions researcher is that positive and negative emotions can combine to form really complex states. Positive emotions can buffer the detriment of feeling anxious or feeling fearful. And it can also help you think more creatively and take in more unique information to problem solve. So, what do we do? And this is what I've been puzzling over the last couple of years, and it's what's going to continue to follow me in my research. I want to offer you three things. The first of which is we have got to reclaim our time to recover from work. With work and non work blended together more than ever before, I worry that we have really sacrificed recovery after working hours. I know I have. And so there's lots of experiences that you can strive for, whether it's psychologically detaching and shutting off those work related thoughts or finding ways to relax. So, yes, I'm literally telling you right now, it's okay to watch Netflix or Disney Plus if you have a toddler in the house. Another unique thing are mastery experiences. So, learning a new skill that can allow you to thrive in your work role and spill over positively. That one has a pretty profound effect in our research. And also making sure you have control of your recovery time. So, mandated happy hours, that's not going to do it. You need to feel autonomy and ownership of how you're spending your time recovering from work. Beyond that, I think we need to start stepping up and really proactively supporting others' well being. And this is something I've been really passionate about well before the pandemic. I think this is particularly the case with people who have really complex work family demands. So, one group we've studied, for instance, are breastfeeding mothers who have to pump breast milk at work. And we've tracked them for several days to understand their experiences. We've found that when they experience compassion and support, they feel better effectively. So when they feel seen, they feel better. When they've been given high quality space to pump breast milk, they again feel better effectively and feel like their work and family are more in balance with each other. Some new research that we're working on, and you're hearing it here first, we're just getting this started, is how supervisors can support recovery. So, supervisors, managers, leaders, recovery starts with you. We had supervisor subordinate dyads come into our study, and we found that when employees said that they psychologically detached from work, when their supervisors were not supportive of that kind of recovery, they felt greater levels of guilt about taking time away from work. And that guilt followed them. They were less engaged. They were more exhausted. They had higher levels of work family conflict. So the signals about valuing recovery in our emotions are really, really impactful. Finally, we really need to start listening to each other. When people are really struggling at work, we need to not push them away, but push them and pull them in to understand what's going on. A few things that I think we can do. One, we need to give people autonomy back. This is specific to Zoom fatigue. Let's not mandate cameras. Give people autonomy. Don't make assumptions about why they may have their camera off. You could actually take a step right now and co create some norms, right? We never really did that. We never set norms for camera use. We just kind of started using it. So now is a great chance to recalibrate that and take a step back. Or maybe not schedule virtual meetings and actually have a phone call where you can go and walk and stretch and move your body. But we also really need to be listening to how people feel. Sagal Bursaid has said that emotions are data, and I cannot agree more. That statement has completely shaped the way that I approach emotions in the workplace. They have a place at work, and we need to listen to the feelings that people are sharing with us. So when someone says to you, man, I'm really burned out and fatigued, that's not something to be proud of. Working to burnout is not something to be proud of. Instead, we need to dial it back and say, wow, where is that fatigue coming from? And what can we do to support you to help make sure you thrive in a way that's not totally running you into the ground? If somebody says they're feeling anxious, we feel anxiety when our current states are dissonant from what our ideal is. So maybe we should be doing more to listen to our colleagues and say, you know what? Let's figure out where that anxiety is coming from and close that gap so you can feel better at work. So we're spending a lot of time right now talking about the return to work, the return to work. But what I want to do, and my challenge for you at the Future of Work conference, is let's talk less about the return to work, because really that means the return to the old way of work. And what I wanted to encourage you to do is talk more about the revival of well-being at work. There are very few moments we get big moments to really shape how we do things and change things for the better. And I truly, truly believe that after everything we've been through over the last couple of years, that this is one of those moments. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the remainder of the conference today.